Dead Art Studios Paint and Chat. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the early life of Pablo Picasso and what led to his sort of blue period of paintings. And we're also going to look at my autumn glow paintings, try and make a little bit of progress on them. Just poured myself a little bit of gloss medium in here, and these paintings have got lots of layers of gloss medium, sort of mixed with a thin amount of acrylic paint, which is sort of making a glaze, and that's why I'm calling them autumn glow, because they've got a sort of shiny glow to them. Been trying to add a little bit of detail into the midground here, and then added a bit of burnt sort of sienna and some green gold in here to try and get an interesting sort of mid landscape, and then a little bit of plant life at the front. So they're the bits that we're going to work on. Now, let's get some paint. What should we do first? Let's do a little bit of burnt sienna on the foreground of this sort of reedy area, really. Now, Pablo Picasso, a Spanish person who left for Paris like many an artist. And he went at sort of 19 years old. He went to Paris with his friend Casagemas and a couple of others. They were sort of prodigies who'd been to art school, and they were poets and writers and things like that. And they went to Paris. I think it was some kind of big show, like they have these sort of national shows, didn't they? What are they called? You know the ones, I mean. And he went there, and they were sort of amazed and taken aback by Paris. And basically, that's where Picasso spent the majority of his artistic career. He did move around a little bit. Let's paint this on. So I've sort of glossed it up, so it's very thin in colour, which is kind of what we want to start with. Just push it on like that. Yeah, so 19 years old. He was a child prodigy, Picasso. And sort of by the time he was sort of mid to late teens, his father, who was like an art professor, had basically come to the conclusion that he'd sort of outperformed him, and his technique was better. And he was sort of able really to copy any of the masters and just basically replicate any painting of that style that he wanted to. But of course, we're not really familiar with Picasso for that kind of academic painting, are we? Sort of copying the Renaissance masters and engaging in high levels of realism. We're sort of better known for his Cubism period, which he came up with Georges Braque, and beyond that, his famous portraits of people like Dora Maar, one of his lovers, one of his many lovers, and also Françoise Gillot, the mother of two of his children. And yes, it's not really where it sits, is it? So this idea of him being a sort of supersonic academic painter. Let's get a bit more of this on. So what led him really to that? Well, partially, I suppose, just being bored with how good he was at that kind of painting, looking for something new. Imagine at that time if you were creating paintings that looked like Pablo Picasso's. It must have been slightly mind-blowing next on the wall, something so bold and crazy next to, I don't know, something more classical, like a landscape or something like that. But he moved with Casagemas to Paris, and Casagemas fell in love with a woman called Germaine, and like Picasso painted Germaine, and he was very upset, Casagemas, because Germaine didn't love him back. And this culminated one night in Casagemas shooting Germaine in a cafe or bar, and then turned the gun on himself, shot himself. Now, Germaine thankfully did survive, but Casagemas did not. And this sent Picasso into a deep, deep depression, and was the beginning of his blue period, which most of us have heard of, I would think, in which all his paintings were sort of in various hues of blue. There was a little bit of yellow in there, contrast the face, yellowy greens, and yeah, and that lasted from sort of 1901 to 1904. Probably his most famous paintings from that period are his self-portrait of himself at like 20 years old. The Guitarist, which I think we all know, with the interesting angular Old Guitarist, with this sort of triangle where he holds guitar and looking down. And he was sort of painting a lot of sort of what Johnny Cash might say, the downtrodden of society. And Picasso himself was one of those people at the time. He had very little money and was just sort of going on some subsistent art living. But he did manage to sell his other blue period painting quite well, La Vie. It was a big painting. The Guitarist was a bit smaller. La Vie features Casagemas. He also did other paintings of Casagemas' death and things like that as part of, I suppose, his grieving process. But yeah, the La Vie painting features Casagemas sort of with what we may think as Jamin and also an older lady, and then sort of just the story of life, which I think a lot of what Picasso's work is about. And yeah, so the blue period came along pretty much because of that event, and it lasted a few years, and then he moved on to his rose period, which had more sort of like rose and peachy and oranges, and in that he focused more on circus folk and stuff like that. Still outsidery, but maybe a little bit of more of a sort of chirpy outlook, shall we say, although Picasso was well known to be depressed throughout much of his life. Right, we've got this on there. It's added a little bit of extra colour. So I think what we'll do is we'll go back into these bits in the middle and try and add some detail into those. I've still got quite a bit of this brown, so I think I might go around the base with this very mangled brush, which is going to hopefully create some interesting texture and see if that helps out. Now, one thing I did wonder about with Picasso, having just observed my daughter skateboarding and watching how sort of amazing she is at just like 5 years old at grasping these new skills, I did wonder, did Picasso sort of forget how to paint as he got older? He spent so long doing abstraction and things like that. The skills required to learn the sort of formulaic painting of the academic and Renaissance style. It's almost like if I learned something when I was a kid, would I still be able to do it when I was 60 or 70? Or was it, is being a child prodigy, is that part of it? You know, if you were doing sport and you're amazing at it when you're a teenager, which often is in the Olympics now, you get like teenage skateboarders and stuff winning medals and stuff like that, and gymnasts. And then old age sort of catches up on you and you can't really do it anymore. Now, does that apply to painting? I did wonder. And it would have been because Picasso never really returned to that kind of super intense academic style. And you could argue that his blue period still hung on a little bit to that, and his sort of rose period as well. Although there was like less signs of like 2-point perspective and things like that. Things were much flatter. And then obviously as he went on to do his portraits after Cubism and during Cubism, the whole face was rearranged and how it was displayed and simplified. And I just do wonder, he went to do lithography, ceramics, sculpture as well. I just do wonder that if he ever thought about settling down to try an academic style painting ever again. But if he had, would he have been able to do it? It's just an interesting thought really on what abilities we have, gain and lose as we sort of age. Right, now this has got a bit more interest down here. I think I need to go in that with the greens and sort of streak up a little bit just to blend it in on this middle bit here. What else can we do with this brown? We don't want to waste the paint. So let's have a look. We've got some over on this side. We can sort of streak it. I'm just going to pin it here. There we go. So it was very dramatic, Picasso's life from day one, really. He lived through the two world wars. He witnessed the death of his friend in a bar or cafe. He spent much of his life in total poverty and then spent a lot of his life in absolute wealth and fame. So it's all very dramatic, Picasso's life. And really, I think about myself and my art journey. I'm not a protege. I'm learning to paint now, and it must be interesting to have been such an amazing painter at such a young age, and apparently he is quoted as saying that his mother said that if he had been a soldier, he would have been like a general, and if he'd been a priest, he would have been the Pope. And then he said, "But I am a painter, and I am Picasso," which is, I don't know, a bit arrogant, but kind of entertaining, don't you think? I've never had an ability like that, even on a slight level. I've always struggled with anything, especially using my hands or doing sports or things like that. Maybe cerebrally, I didn't find things quite as difficult, but certainly in doing things like painting and things like that, I'm certainly not naturally talented. And I wonder if that limits me. I wonder if can I get where I want to go? I spend most of my time when I'm painting feeling very frustrated about it not going quite how I wanted it to, or not being able to express what I wanted to, or just being generally clumsy and things like that. I do wonder if Picasso ever felt like that, or whether it just flowed and felt easy to him. Just putting a bit of brown in here. I do know that painting with the brush like I am now, I do a lot of my paintings with blades and things like that, and knives. When I paint with the brush, I certainly have to concentrate more, and I find it harder to talk. I do wonder how these paintings are going to turn out as well. They're certainly more realistic or more representative. I suppose they border more on impressionism than abstract art, is what I'm getting at if I think of it in that way. And even though they're imagined and intuitive, they're still trying to be something that you can see when you look out of a window or go on a walk. And I do find that more challenging. I wonder whether I'm going to finish them and whether I'm going to overwork them. Knowing where to stop is going to be difficult as well. I will continue with them and I'll see what progress I make. And hopefully when I've finished, I can make a big long video about the whole of my autumn painting really and where it's led me. Anyway, a little thought on Picasso's life, the blue period. We'll look a bit more at it. I have got some blue paint. I'm going to have a go at a blue period painting. I'm in the process of getting everything together for that. I'm going to be doing some more wiki art deep dives. I've got to do the second part of Lowry. I've got to do the second part of Lowry, the wiki art deep dive, and try and throw a few artist vlogs in there as well. Dead Art Studios Paint and Chat. See you next time.